What's going on, young ends? It's your boy, Ghetto the Orator, back with another Young and Pro Black Chronicles. I appreciate y'all for engaging with the content and interacting however you see fit. Like, comment, subscribe. Today, the topic is Negro issues. As you can tell by the clip art, the state of integration has brought us really to a railroad, in my opinion. So I have a question. At this point of integration, are we really better off? Coming out of a world where all we knew was the caves, sun up, sun down, working for, raising their children, being the bedrock and the foundation of the American economy, and just and just being so close yet so far from the caves for so long, to come out of that all of a sudden, I can imagine, is not easy. I can imagine that I really can't even imagine, to be honest, what it would be like to go from being in chains, in bondage, and just the psychological undertaking and conditioning that goes along with being black during that time of slavery for 246 years of just perpetual servitude and atrocities that I can't even begin to imagine, right? To come out of that, and to come out of that with no foundation for education, to come out of that with no kind of plan for where we go from that point. We come, the ancestors came out of slavery and they were told that they were going to be given 40 acres and a mule by the same government that allowed them to be in slavery in the first place, right? To be enslaved in the first place. So we're at this point, we're at a time where Reconstruction is what it is what's happening. And we need this in order to be autonomous, to become our own people, because we were just forced to build this, to build America in its earliest stages, but we did not incorporate these skills for ourselves. At least so the caves thought. And we didn't have any skills as far as being able to read and write and financial, and having financial literacy. We didn't have those kinds of skills. We didn't have that kind of education. We didn't have that understanding, being raised wealthy or being raised with resources. We didn't have that advantage, right? Yet and still, even after Reconstruction was dismantled, even after all these attempts to keep the ancestors, I mean, really lower than where they were, because if you free someone from captivity and they've been in captivity for so long, they don't know how to be free. Especially when you think about the game that America is. And I can only imagine it was way more savage back then. Even through all of that, we were still a threat to them because we became autonomous within ourselves. We became completely autonomous. We did this in multiple places around the country, around not even just in the South, after slavery. Something that should not have even happened. How is it that we were able to come out of bondage and become something really greater than them, greater than our oppressors, greater than the people that had us in bondage. Of course, you had black folk that were, still sharecropping and not doing well. But then you also had a time where black people could run to other black people for refuge and for asylum to better their opportunity and the circumstances for not only them but their families as well. And not to mention, black marriage and black relationships were also doing a lot better. Children being born out of wedlock wasn't as high of a thing back in those days, like significantly, like a 60 to 70% difference, right? But somewhere along the line, even after the bombing and the legislative redlining of our prosperous communities, even after all that, we were still finding a way to just keep going along and being to ourselves. We were still autonomous, no matter how many monkey wrenches they tried to throw at us, until they threw the biggest monkey wrench at us that they could ever fucking think of, which was integration. They wouldn't leave us alone, right? Because they said that we were too great by ourselves. We were too great by ourselves to where we were a threat to them. We became a threat to their survival, right? Which is why they had us in bondage and enslaved in the first place, right? So they said, these niggas is becoming a threat. These niggas, this can't happen. They refuse to leave us alone. So they incite situations that would cause for a lot of attention. And then once that attention is garnered, then say, hey, we need to bring about peace amongst these two groups so that way these kinds of events and tragedies don't happen. Tragedies don't happen. And that we can move about amicably as Americans. Kiss my ass. And this was thought to be the case, and this was what was propagandized to us more so than anybody else, because integration and civil rights was supposed to be looked at as a win for us. But the one thing that was never addressed is the fact that we had spent so long and spent such a great amount of time in close proximity to the caves to where we began to identify with them, to the point where once integration happened and we're moving into the 70s, we're taking on their plights. This is how you get black women supporting the second wave of feminism. This is how you get black men going to fight in the caves wars, even after the Civil War. Like, we should have known better than to be fighting their wars. It doesn't gain us anything. It didn't gain us anything, and it's never going to gain us anything to fight in their wars and to make their problems ours. But we sure as fuck do. We look at each other as how the caves see us, because we've spent so much time in close proximity to them. And it's, how else could it be? We've spent so much time in close proximity to them, and we have come to look at ourselves as how they look at us in the worst ways, as to where all of our problems, all of our collective problems, we see us solely as the cause of our problems, not thinking about how we got here, not thinking about the fact that we were never allowed, we were never just left the fuck alone. Whether or not we had, like, whatever the ancestors' issues may have been, whatever problems that we had within our community, it's not like that's anybody else's responsibility to say, hey, you have problems within your community. Obviously, you don't know what the fuck to do with yourself, so we're going to take control of you. We're going to tell you what to do. We're going to give you thoughts to have, and we're going to No, that's not because you're just wild fucking savages and you don't know how to. No, fuck you. Because look at y'all motherfuckers. And we and that's just not a way to live. But it in this day and age, unfortunately, a lot of black folk don't really see a problem with the way things are. At least not enough to come together long enough to where we can make and sustain change. So all of the issues that we have as a people, really, it and I understand that it doesn't do us any good to blame the caves. Yes, there are certain decisions that Negroes make to perpetuate our issues, but understand cause and effect, and you'll begin to understand why we made certain decisions in the circumstances that we did, i.e., we wouldn't have sold each other drugs if the caves didn't drop off guns and drugs into impoverished communities. How the fuck did we get impoverished? Well, economic redlining, right? Cause economic redlining, affect the rotting of the black community when you put guns and drugs into it. How else the fuck were we gonna get guns and drugs? We had no access to boats and these kinds of people who know how to get drugs and make and manufacture drugs. We don't have labs and ships and shit like that. So how the fuck did we get guns and drugs? It's gonna happen when you put those kinds of things into an impoverished community. We're gonna take those things on, and we're gonna become the worst of ourselves, and then we're gonna create a culture around it, and then there's gonna be music created around it, i.e., where we are today. All in all, at this point, it does no good for us to be fighting each other, though, because of our issues. Like, we already are aware of our issues. We don't need to be fighting each other, and we damn sure don't need to let the cave see us fighting, because that only makes their case in point more accurate. They already feel about us how they do. They don't need to see us fighting each other. We fight each other all the time. We make means to do it all the time. And it only proves them right. It only proves them right to say and feel however they do about us. And how are they ever supposed to really be on our side if we don't even understand what our side is and what our plight is? Right? So, thinking about that, is there really a way for us to move forward? And if so, how do we do it? We have to unify, but for what? Is there even anything for us to unify for? Is there a point? Are we going to get anything out of it? And my answer to that is, of course we will. But if there's not seen, if we don't see each other as equals, if we don't see each other as brothers and sisters, if we don't see each other as family, if we don't see each other as people to protect, then we will not continue. We will not go any further from this point, which will also mean that integration worked exactly the way that they wanted it to, because it is my belief that integration was a tool for them to bring us down even further, to give us the illusion that everything is now better off, so therefore we don't need to fight. And that's exactly what we're doing, playing right into their hands. So in closing, are we really mentally removed from slavery? And if so, what do we have to show for it? I'm gonna let y'all think on that. Let me know what you think about what I just said. Join in the discussion. Appreciate you for tuning in to today's episode. Like, share, comment, subscribe. Appreciate y'all. Peace.